At this point, I'll have to say goodbye to one of these amazing handhelds, Switch 2 or Steam Deck OLED. Which one should I keep? Let's start with some context. I've never used original Nintendo Switch, so I've missed out on many iconic exclusives like Zelda, Mario. On the other hand, I was early adopter of the original Steam Deck, with the LCD screen of course, and I was blown away by how incredible it felt to play my favorite PC games on the go. I even promised myself that if Valve will ever release OLED version, I'd grab it instantly because, let's be honest, the LCD panel and battery life were the two biggest drawbacks of the original. Steam Deck is a true game changer. It's completely open, you can install any operating system you want, Windows, Linux or even macOS, not recommended but technically possible. You can mod your games, install cheat plugins or emulate older consoles. The freedom it offers is unmatched. In contrast, the Switch 2 is a tight controlled ecosystem. You can only legally download games from the Nintendo eShop, which feels very much like using iPhone or iPad logged into the App Store. That said, the Switch 2 is a beautiful piece of hardware. It has smallest footprint of any modern handhelds and one of the largest screens. I honestly wish someone would build Windows-based handheld in this form factor, so we could install SteamOS or BuzzOS on it and get the ultimate hybrid device. All it's missing is an OLED panel instead of IPS. Now let's talk about battery. The Switch 2 has surprisingly small battery, 20 Wh compared to 50 Wh on Steam Deck OLED. However, Nvidia pulled off something impressive here. The custom APU inside Switch 2 is incredibly power efficient. It can run games like Cyberpunk at 1080p using of course heavy DLSS, and it still looks great. At full load, both devices last about 2 hours. But here's the kicker, Switch 2 only draws around 8.6 watts while Steam Deck OLED pulls 15 watts of power. Imagine if Valve used this chip in Steam Deck 2, it could double the performance at the same power draw. Unfortunately, Nintendo would probably send ninjas after Valve if that will ever happen. But seriously, Valve needs to join Team Green, Nvidia, if they want to stay competitive. Right now AMD is in hot water. Their latest handheld APUs are powerful but inefficient. They focus on raw performance while neglecting power consumption. FSR4 is still in development, frame generation is missed in action, and RDNA 4 will be desktop only for a while. Handhelds will likely have to wait until RDNA 5 to see real innovation. There are pros and cons in both systems when it comes to usability. I like how Switch 2 gives you multiple ways to play, handheld, dock to TV, Joy-Cons detached, that's awesome, but the ergonomics, not so much. The grip is shallow and after 30 minutes my fingers just go numb. Steam Deck on contrast feels like a glove. Quite amazing, but of course I'm talking about handheld use only. When Switch 2 is connected to a TV via docking station, it can go up to 4K and it looks quite impressive to be honest. Heavy DLSS again, but it's working great. Battery life during heavy gaming is similar, around 2 hours. But for light tasks, Steam Deck can stretch up to 10 hours, while Switch 2 manages about 6 hours. Steam Deck also lets you restrict power and tweak settings so you can get 3-4 hours of Cyberpunk, of course at lower graphic settings. On Switch 2 you are stuck with 2 hours no matter what. Charging is another pain point. Both takes nearly 3 hours to fully charge with no fast charge support. For comparison, the ROG Ally, the first one, charges in 1 hour, and Ally X with its massive 80 Wh battery charges in 90 minutes. That's a battery king status in my opinion. Now let's talk about biggest downside of Switch 2, the games and store. Since I never had Switch 1, I'm starting from scratch. Every game costs 40 to 70 pounds. Many of these are Switch 1 ports running at 30 frames per second with low resolution. The worst part, Switch 2 games aren't free upgrades. For example, Hogwarts Legacy had 2 separate ports, one for Switch 1, another for Switch 2. 2 different games, 2 different purchases. The Witcher 3 will likely follow the same model. It honestly feels like Nintendo is squeezing every single penny from players. Meanwhile, on Steam Deck I get full game with adjustable graphics, one-time purchase and cross-device support. I can buy Hogwarts Legacy once and play it on my deck, PC, any other handheld, and I can get it on Steam sales for like £20. Let's not forget the screens. The Switch 2 has a 1080p 120Hz IPS panel, but it's one of the cheapest looking IPS screens I've ever seen. The Steam Deck OLED, despite being just 800p 90Hz, looks stunning. The contrast, colors, depth and vibrancy are just next level. I am also super hyped for Lenovo Legion Go 2, which will have an 8-inch OLED 144Hz screen and Ryzen 2 Extreme chip. Subscribe because I will be reviewing that day one and turning into my personal ultimate Steam Deck OLED. Conclusion: I'm keeping the Steam Deck OLED mainly because of freedom it gives. I know not everyone wants to tinker with settings, but I love personalizing my gaming experience. That's why I prefer PC gaming over consoles. Also, when I buy a game on Steam, I can play it on multiple devices. On Switch, you are just locked to Switch. These are fundamentally different devices. If you're using the Switch original and have big library, you'll love the Switch 2. But if you've got huge Steam backlog like me, the Deck is a perfect excuse to finally play them through. What do you think? Which handheld you prefer? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I will see you in next one. Bye. If we'll play Cyberpunk on Steam Deck OLED without GeForce Now, we'll have to of course lower our settings. But you know what? We can lower our settings in Cyberpunk, when on Switch 2 you cannot do that. No. Right now we're at medium settings and using XeSS at ultra quality. Also, let's switch crowd density to high. On Steam Deck OLED you can always call this side menu and you have so much things to control, like frame limit, TDP. If we will lower our TDP, we'll have more battery life but less performance. It is always like a trade. But we can adjust anything on Steam Deck. And also we have this wonderful overlay where you can see every single thing about your game right now. I normally use overlay number 2, but you can go all the way to number 4. And this overlay will show you every single thing what is happening inside your device, which is mental. This is the best overlay I have ever seen, period. And look at that, at medium settings, 800p XeSS ultra quality, we are at 42 FPS. Cyberpunk right now is more than playable on Steam Deck. It will drop to like 35 in the most intensive scenes, but this is the lowest you will see and it still will be playable. But Steam Deck is doing very good job even without GeForce Now. But sometimes I prefer to go all the way up and GeForce Now is a very good option in my opinion.